Let's go over the basic supplies you're going to need to do your ice dye. You're going to need something to protect your surface, so we're going to use a plastic tablecloth today. I normally just use a plastic tub. It's easier just to do it in that and then close it up. You'll also need some fabric, and you're going to need some little plastic tubs or takeaway containers. Most importantly, the dye. Now we use Fiber Reactive dye for ice dyeing, and then you're going to need the ice as well. You'll also need some safety equipment such as a face mask and gloves. Fiber Reactive dyes come in a powder form, and because we'll be working with the powder, it's important that we don't breathe it in, and it can be quite irritating for your skin. Okay, let's get started. So first up, we've got to prepare our fabric. So you're going to wash your fabric just to remove any sizing and anything from the factory. Then you're going to mix up your soda ash solution, and I usually leave my fabric soaking overnight, and then I start the dye process in the morning. Then you can chuck your fabric into the washing machine on a spin cycle just to get it almost dry, and then you're ready to start dyeing. One thing I really love about Fiber Reactive dyes is a little goes a long way. So with the first onesie, I'm actually going to try something new with putting the deep space, which is a very deep navy, underneath the actual onesie. So we're going to put it in first. And because I'm dyeing in the muck, what I'm hoping is all the melted ice will melt down through the onesie and then create really dark contrasting colors on the back in the valleys of the actual fabric. Speaking of fabric, what we're going to do is we're going to do the scrunch technique. Now I left my onesies a little bit long to dry, so they are completely dry, so that's why it feels a little bit like cardboard. It's actually quite difficult to scrunch, but you want to leave yours just damp. So normally it's best just to get out of your soda ash solution, and then you just simply chuck it in the washing machine on that spin cycle, and it'll spin it out till it's almost damp, and that's the right kind of moisture you want. Otherwise it's just too hard to get the nice scrunch. Now the whole idea when you're scrunching this is to make sure that you're having a lot of high peaks and low valleys. That'll make for a really interesting dye. Now to add the ice. Color we're going to put on, we're going to start from the lightest color and then go to the darkest color. So this is a chartreuse, which is a really nice lemony green. Next is bright green. This one's very vibrant, and I'm hoping it will get some really nice vibrant punch in the fabric. I'm putting a fair amount of dye on top of the ice just because I do want to make sure that I do get a fair bit of color and it's not too overpowered by the time it hits the muck and hits the navy. Next up we have new emerald green. I really enjoy this process, it's really fun. And you never know what you're going to get, really. Like, you could do the same thing and think you've done exactly the same, and it'll come out completely different. I'm just going to go back and get the bright green and then fill in anywhere where I can see ice and no dye. I don't want any white spots on the onesies. Now for my final color, Kingfisher Blue, by far my favorite. It's really dark, so I'm not going to add too much of it, as I want to still keep the onesie light. Okay, we finished adding all our dye. Now we just got to wait for the ice to melt. So here it's been about an hour later, and I'm going to start my second onesie. This one I haven't got any dye on the underside. Now whenever you're working with Fiber Reactive dyes, or soda ash for that matter, you should always wear gloves and your face mask. Don't worry, the final project is completely safe for bobbers. Fiber Reactive dyes is the best dye to use as it is the most permanent. If you want to find out more information, I've popped the link in the description below. And here's where your plastic spoons come into play too, because you want to try and use a different spoon for each dye color so you don't cross-contaminate each coloring. But I'm not too fussy with that because really I just use these dyes for ice dyeing, so I like to get a good mix of colors anyway. So if there's a surprise, then I don't know, I always find it's a nice surprise. Another safety tip is just to make sure that anything that you do use for dyeing, you don't use it for food. So these spoons can no longer be used to eat. So this is quite a messy technique, and because it's powder dye, the powder just gets everywhere. So to try and contain some of the mess, I like to put my spoons in a little separate container so I can wash it straight afterwards. So now I'm putting on a bit of turquoise just because I'm thinking I want a little bit more blue in this, and I wanted something that was going to blend in well with hot pink. Yeah, so in order to separate the green and the red colors, I thought I definitely need to have a blue in the middle there, just so I don't make mud or that brown muddy color. Although I found it's really difficult to do that. Every piece that I've dyed so far has come up really beautiful, so it must be really difficult to get those really murky, yucky colors when you do this technique. I've also been experimenting a little bit with different techniques. So at the moment with the second one, we're putting the dye on first and then we're going to layer the ice. I really don't want any white, so that's where the yellow over the top of the ice comes into play. Okay, we're good, so we can wait for it to melt now, and then we've got 24 hours for it to batch. Okay, it is rinse time, and this is by far my favorite part of the whole process. It's like a grand reveal. You never know really what you're gonna get until you rinse it out and you can have a good look at it. Even the muck is surprising for me, all the colors, and I'm always constantly surprised that they don't mix to make mud. So I really wish the hot pink had come out more pink. It's kind of red, but we'll see how the color changes once it has the hot wash through the machine. It will still look different once again, like gonna undergo many transformations. This part's pretty messy as well, so you could do this outside if you wanted to. I find it doesn't stain because I don't leave the water sitting or the dye sitting long enough in order for it to make a stain, but you might want to be careful if you're doing this in your sink. Now onto the first onesie we did. This one was all the greens and the kingfisher blue. So no surprise there with the deep space on the bottom. The muck is a little bit darker. The one thing I was worried about here was that navy blue overpowering, but by the looks of that beautiful bright green peeking through, it's done what I really hoped it was going to do. I'm really excited to see how it turns out. I rinse majority of the dye and muck out in the sink, and this is just cold water, and here I just spray both the onesies over the top of the grid until the water runs clear. Once the water's clear, I can then put it in the washing machine. Hey Mira. There's my baby just talking. She's excited to wear her new onesies. Hey! And now the fabric's ready to be hot washed in your machine. Once I took them out, as you can see from the photos, the fabric is so bright and beautiful. I'm really happy with how they turned out. And here's the recipes for the colors if you want to try replicate this at home. It's a really fun process. And what colors would you choose? Feel free to leave some comments or some suggestions. I'd be happy to try some out. I'm loving all the experimenting. Thanks so much for watching. That's all from me today. Bye!
Bye!